It's great to be back for another great AIM webinar, this time with our friends from AvePoint, talking about records management and Microsoft 365. And it's an important topic because, well, many reasons, but over the last 2 years, Microsoft 365 has seen an explosion of new users and increased usage. Office 365 is now used by over 50 million subscribers. There are 145 million daily Microsoft Teams users. In fact, Teams jumped 50% last year alone. And the bottom line is that 1 out of 5 corporate employees now use Microsoft 365. And for some organizations, that's 100%. And in fact, it's likely that if you are attending this webinar today, it's because you are a Microsoft 365 user. And for records managers and information management professionals, this explosion in Microsoft 365 adoption presents new and rising levels of complexity and scope. And in fact, according to our research here at AIM, 42% of respondents of our surveys have reported that the volume and variety of records within their Microsoft 365 environment are expanding too quickly to manage and protect properly. And so that is what we are going to be exploring today, how to use modern information management practices to gain insight and control over content in M365. We'll learn how to change your approach to achieve more creative and successful outcomes, how to put some guardrails around the explosion of records, and some best practices and tools to migrate, manage, and protect your records within Microsoft 365. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our guest experts today, starting with Alyssa Blackburn. Alyssa Blackburn is Director of Information Management at AvePoint, and she has worked with both public and private sector organizations, and she's an expert in records management solutions with government agencies and commercial clients. Joining us as well is Bruce Behrens. Bruce is a senior solutions engineer and product strategist at AvePoint. He's got 20 years experience across multiple technical consulting and management roles, focused on small and large businesses, public and private organizations with a wide range of technologies. And he's an expert in the architecture and design of Microsoft solutions. So Alyssa and Bruce, welcome to our event today. Please tell us more.
Thanks, Kevin. We are delighted to be here on May the 4th. If you hadn't picked it up already, we've themed our webinar today around, of course, Star Wars Day. If you haven't seen Star Wars, we'll definitely try and explain some of the references as we go through. But we're so delighted to be here with AIM. We were so lucky to have been in Denver last week for the conference, and we're thrilled to be continuing this conversation with you.
Well, welcome aboard.
Today.
May the 4th be with you.
Absolutely. I think we're still recovering from the jet lag, so I think we're going to need whatever force we can get to.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm just going to share my screen so we can get started. First of all, we just want to point out that today we'll be using a tool called Slido. Now, thanks to COVID, everyone knows how to scan a QR code, so you can access this on your mobile if you wish to. Or you can go to slido.com and put in the number on the screen here, and this will allow you to interact and participate with us because we have a few questions to ask you, the audience, throughout the whole entire webinar that we have here. So if you don't get to it quickly enough just now, that's fine. It'll be up the top left-hand corner of every single question screen that comes up that we can work with. So we're really excited to be here, as Alyssa said, and to get your, I suppose, your feedback and some interactivity happening here, because we believe that webinars should be collaborative processes, not just us speaking to you.
Absolutely. We'd definitely love to get your input and opinion as we go through. So as Bruce said, you can either scan that QR code using a smartphone or just go to slido.com and enter 423329 and you'll be able to join from a browser as well.
Awesome. All right.
Let's get into it.
Let's get started. So the first thing that we have I suppose, on that we want to talk about is about how people can, be more like Ewoks. So we want you to change your approach to achieve creative and successful outcomes, much like the Ewoks did very early in the piece.
So what we really want to talk about here is about when we're thinking about managing information in a collaboration environment, it's not the same as what we would do when we would manage it in a traditional document and records management system. The structure of a collaboration platform like M365 is inherently different to the way we've maybe managed information in the past. So what we need to do, if we're really trying to become a Jedi master in information and records management in a 365 environment, is we need to ensure that we adjust our approach accordingly to suit the environment that we're working in. So those of you who have seen, those Ewoks, of course, appear in Return of the Jedi. But for those of you who haven't, who maybe haven't seen Star Wars,
first of all, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, that's right. Like
anyway.
get on. You need to get on that right away. In fact, we give you permission to take the rest of the day off to go and watch it, because given that it is May the 4th, yeah. And that holds a lot of weight in many organizations, definitely. But what we see in Return of the Jedi, and particularly with the Ewoks, is when they were fighting against the Empire, who are the bad guys, they didn't just use sort of traditional guns or things like that, or lightsabers, stuff that they had used in say some of the other battles that we see in Star Wars. They adjust to their environment. So they hide nets in trees, they dig holes, that people might fall into and things like that. They changed their entire approach to meet the planet Endor. I'm really impressed that I'm getting all these Star Wars references right. Yeah. But they changed their approach to meet the environment that they're working in. And this is exactly the same for records managers. It's no different at all. Our 365 collaboration platform is really different to what we've been used to working in. So we need to change our approach to that. Now, that might include things like looking at how we apply our life cycle rules. So maybe some of our retention and disposal rules. Maybe we actually need to start by looking holistically at our life cycle rules and how we're going to configure and manage those to suit more of a collaboration environment, say, rather than the way we would do it traditionally. And that's definitely one of my key points here is starting with what those rules look like. Some of you might already be looking into this kind of thing, and if you are, I say absolutely fantastic, well done. If you're not, absolutely something to go and consider. Is normally we can have, hundreds upon hundreds of these rules, maybe that have a lot of the same outcome. Maybe we can combine some of those together for information that's similar, so that it makes it a whole lot easier to apply in a collaboration environment. So if we have a look, let's actually have a look at what 365 looks like, I guess, in terms of a hub for collaboration. So we see things here like, 365 takes into account things like Office applications, content authoring, versioning. Now, this is a really interesting one as well for us as records managers with co-authoring. Now, like, how good is co-authoring? Makes work so much more efficient for everybody, which is fantastic. But it also creates a version every single time something gets co-authored. So that's, that can have a really significant impact on storage costs and things like that. 365, of course, it's not just about documents. We've also got chat, we've got calls, we've got meetings. How many meetings get recorded every time we do them that we're now needing to manage potentially as a record? We've also got bots and connectors, maybe to other systems, other programs, other things within the 365 environment. So you can actually have, if you're an organization that's using Yammer, you can embed Yammer in your team, for example. And then how are we considering that?
List of libraries as well.
List of libraries, absolutely. And then of course we've got all of our people in there, and that's really where they're working. And Kevin made some great points and gave us some interesting information at the beginning as well about the explosion of 365. We're all seeing it. Nobody can deny it. You might be various ways on your journey, but nobody's denying that this is a real thing. So we do need to change our approach because the environment that we're working in is really, really different. So going back to what I was talking about before, maybe starting at looking at our retention and disposal rules or our life cycle rules and things like that, we've got really 3 essential things that we want to consider here. Those retention and disposal rules, how they link to a business classification scheme, taxonomy, file plan, things like that. And then how that links to the information architecture. When I say information architecture, I just mean the structure of where things live in 365. Now, those are the 3 essentials that we need to consider as records managers. They're going to stay the same. Maybe the path though, or the way that we look at them is different. So rather than starting with our retention and disposal rules, absolutely that's something that we want to very, very seriously consider. We actually need to think about, how's our information being structured? How are our users interacting with that? And then we can look at how's the file plan going to map to that structure. And only then do we look at, okay, now how are our rules aligning to that as well? So like the Ewoks, we want to adjust to our environment. This is a war against information overload, definitely. And we need to ensure that we're approaching that in the most appropriate way, definitely.
Cool. So let's look at our first Slido.
Good idea.
So our first Slido is a question to you guys, which is, what was something that you changed in your records and information management program that was successful? So this is a word cloud. So what will happen here is, if you guys put in responses, they'll start to appear live on the screen. And we'll be able to see, if there's common responses that come through, obviously they'll appear bigger on the word cloud than others.
Yeah, just a reminder that you can join either by scanning that QR code with a smartphone, or you can join at slido.com and by entering that number there. So always seeing some really interesting stuff. I'm here. Oh, I love this one here about endorsement from exec. That's absolutely so important, most definitely. So it's really good to see that one, on here. Oh, I see retention schedule. Yay! That makes me really happy, because the simplification, and this is what I was talking about before, sorry, I get too fast because I get too excited about this. I'm sorry. But when we talk about the simplification of our retention schedule, it makes me so happy that I can see that as the biggest thing on the screen there. Because that's such a vital component. It's what we need to adhere to, most definitely, but the way that we approach that, we need to take that different approach. We need to take that Ewok approach to it so that we can get the outcome. So we don't need to think necessarily about the pathway that we take there. We need to think about where it is that we're going. You can see a few people here that's sort of not in 365 yet, but great. Please do input as well, even if you're not in 365 yet, because we'd love to get, what is it that you're thinking about? What is it that you're considering? That hopefully there's some good stuff in here. And some absolutely sensational stuff. Thank you so much, everybody, for putting all of this in. It's really, really good to see. Definitely limiting permissions. I think that's a really interesting one as well.
Interesting that you say that, because we were talking before about information architecture. Yes, it is all about the structure, but it's also about the security across different areas within M365. So it's about understanding, if I create a workspace for my HR or people and culture content, then I need to limit who has access to that information, because obviously you don't want everyone to have access to everyone's payroll information type thing.
Training. Oh, there's a good one. We're seeing training making a last minute break in there as well, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm not joking when I say, and I know that you already know this, but I could do a webinar on every single one of these topics.
I know
sorry, AIIM, I'm coming for you with all of my webinars. This is great, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for putting in. Should we keep going?
We'll keep going. Thank you, everyone. And you will still be able to answer the questions as we keep.
And so we have more that we'd love to get your input on, most definitely.
Awesome.
So many good things on there.
All right. So the next thing, let's have a look at C3PO. So C3PO is, champion human cyborg relations,
Mm-hmm.
and can speak, thousands of different languages. So it's all about bridging that communication gap when you are speaking those different languages. And this is a little bit similar to, I suppose, the session that we did do at the AIIM conference around when IT and records managers collide. So we're going to actually start off with the Slido here. We're going to ask how you bridge the gap when you talk to other parts of your organization about records and information management. So what types of things do you do?
What types of strategies?
Yeah, do you put into play when it comes to talking to IT, talking to finance, or talking
to your end users?
Yeah, that type of stuff as well. Really interested to get some feedback on what you've got here.
The one I
make them feel like
yes, I love this. This is fantastic. What's in it for them? Amazing. Making things better. What is it that we can do to make things better for everybody else, which is absolutely sensational. Definitely. I think I did see something in there. Come as a helper, not as a compliance agent. That is a round of applause to whoever put that in. Congratulations.
Perhaps they came to our session.
Maybe they did,
yeah,
but that's no. I even love the language of as not a compliance enforcer, but come as a helper, like a compliance agent. I think that's absolutely perfect. Or if we're going with our Star Wars theme, we should have said maybe a compliance stormtrooper. I would have been more impressed had you used stormtrooper. Some absolutely sensational things in here. Common language, always see common language. Sorry, you can see that we're seeing it as you guys are as well. But common language is really important. That's certainly one of the key things that I try and use when I'm talking and going out and talking to other organizations and things like that, is making sure that I use a language that's appropriate to them. Now, yep. I speak two languages. I speak Australian and English. And so it is, then having to adjust to, because I'm really fortunate that I do get to work globally, being able to adjust to different, even geographic regions in how I approach things has been really important. I can tell you now, I'm absolutely loving the whole what's in it for them being the biggest, being the biggest thing on here. I think
make them feel like a hero, which is
I really like that one a lot, well, definitely. So. And I think that there's some absolutely key strategies on this screen here that we can definitely take away in terms of putting in our arsenal to become a records management Jedi. So let's have a little bit more of a talk about this one.
Cool. All right. Well, the first step is communication.
Yes, I love this slide. Yeah. Because my drawing's the one at the beginning. Definitely not not my forte. I will talk about records and information management as the day is long, but do not ask me to draw anything about it, because you'll definitely get that extremely poor horse.
Yeah. So the story here is obviously making sure that you are talking about the same thing, getting your requirements across in a clear and concise manner, probably unlike the English that we're speaking to everyone at the moment. But more so one of the common words, and we bring this up all the time, is the word file. Okay, so as an IT person, primarily the word file for me is, a document, or for want of a better term, a record of some kind. It's not a combination or a compilation of documents. A container.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's very similar wording, but can mean two completely different things. And I've been in situations where I've spoken to records managers for hours thinking that we're talking about a particular thing. That was and we're actually having arguments about particular things when we're actually talking about two different things. Yeah. So it's about understanding how to best, I suppose, communicate with the people that you're talking to, understanding the language that they use and the similarities to the language that they use and to what you may use as a records manager.
This is the other thing I would say about this as well, particularly when we're talking to IT. And this is about, and I'm going back to my Ewok slide from before, about understanding and adjusting to your environment, because us being involved in how 365 gets rolled out, how it gets configured, how it gets structured, things like that is absolutely vitally important. So we might think that we're asking for the drawing that's at the back end of the horse there, but we need to be really clear about what it is that we're asking for and how we need to implement things. So when we're making our case for how information management or information lifecycle is going to be implemented in 365, we might think that we're asking for things appropriately, but actually what we end up with is something like the extremely poorly drawn horse on the other side there. So it's really, really important that we can describe what it is. And this is why it's so important to be outcome focused, not journey focused, outcome focused about this is the outcome that I need to achieve. Maybe the path that I'm going to get there, it looks a little bit different to what I anticipated, but I'm still going to get to that outcome. And that's why communication is absolutely vital in this area.
All right, so let's move along. Teamwork. So this is all about working towards obviously a common goal. This is probably my favorite meme that we have in the whole presentation deck. So it's about making sure that once you've got that communication down pat, that everyone knows what the end game is or what that outcome is that we were talking about, and therefore you are all working towards that common goal. Now, following on from that, if for whatever reason there's somewhat of a disagreement or something like that as part of approaching that common goal, then you need to bring into that negotiation component. So it's about being collaborative with your organization, being collaborative with the stakeholders, be that IT, be that executives or end users even, and starting to build those champions throughout it, but also negotiating the terms of what's acceptable from a records and compliance standard, or regulatory and compliance standard, what you're willing to bend on and what you're not willing to bend on. I don't know what most records managers are willing to bend on. Maybe not a lot. But
some of you may have heard me talk about, certainly if you were at AIIM last week, you will have heard me talk about my son Hamish. Some of you may have also heard me talk about one of my other children, Lulu, and you may have even heard me talk about my Lulu rule, which is really essentially about deciding how much you're going to argue on certain things. So I had to, my little baby is not baby anymore really, but she's quite stubborn. Don't know where she gets it from. Certainly not me. Must be her father. But I've really had to learn in parenting her that there are some things that are just not worth having an argument about. So what I need to decide with her is, where am I willing to negotiate to, and what am I willing to let up on? So, and again, I keep going back to this outcome, and it's so important, which is why I'm going to keep talking about it. And that is, what is the outcome that I need to get to, and how much am I willing to move on that? And deciding that at the beginning is a really important path to sort of help you make some of those decisions as you go, and to help you realize, no, this is something that I'm really going to stick strong on, because it's absolutely critical for us as an organization to be able to achieve this. There are other things that maybe I'm more likely to let up on, but negotiation's a really important one. And deciding at the beginning, what are your non-negotiables? What are the things you're willing to negotiate to a point? And what are the things you're willing to kind of go, you know what, not really bothered by this anymore. I'm going to let this one go. Cool.
All right, let's move on to our next one. So the next one is all about the force. All right, so this is, as Kevin mentioned before, about how to control the explosion of records and information in your organization.
I think we can all agree, and Kevin again made some really good points in his introduction about the explosion of information in in 365. And this was something that was always going to happen. I'm just not sure that we expected it to happen at the pace that it did over the last 2 years.
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah, thanks, exactly. Yeah. And there was when sort of COVID first came out, everybody started working from home and working online and things like that. There was a really clever meme going around about a multiple choice about what was it that actually drove your digital transformation, and there's a big red circle around the COVID pandemic. And so because we have had to ramp up really quickly, and perhaps without the governance or structure that we would have liked to have had, that has resulted in chaos, most definitely. And that's not a comfortable place for anybody to be, because it's much, much harder to go back and try and clean things up than it is to kind of set those structures and set those boundaries at the beginning. Let's get some more input into what have people seen though. What would you say? We'd love to hear from you. This is not a word cloud this time.
It's a multiple choice.
But what's the level of chaos for those of you who are using M365? Oh, I love that. For those of you who are using 365, do you feel like you're tearing your arms off like a Wookiee would? Are you slightly panicked like C-3PO is?
Well controlled like a Jedi.
Are you well controlled like a Jedi? Or for those of you who maybe aren't using,
we have to do the hand movement?
These are not the droids you are looking for. When we put this slide together, both Bruce and I did the droid move, definitely. So it's really interesting to me that people are, very few people, although for those of you who are feeling well controlled like a Jedi, yay,
that's awesome.
That's amazing. And it's great to see that there are some people on there.
I'm very worried about the 10%.
Yeah.
Or 9% that we've got here.
But I totally understand the feeling of being slightly panicked like C-3PO. Again, some of you who might have heard me talk before, you will know that I did spend a lot of my career, in fact, actually the majority of my career, working in government as an information manager. And I can tell you right now that in the same position, I would have picked exactly the same thing as what we're seeing on the screen here, slightly panicked like C-3PO. And this is actually my biggest regret in the organization that I worked in previously, was that I felt like I hit that panic button too soon, rather than taking that step back, taking a breath and figuring out, okay, let me think about what it is that I need to have in place here, and let me figure out the right plan. I just tried to put out every file all in the one go. If I had my time again, I certainly would like to have just, maybe like R2D2, take a, do a few beeps, take a minute and get it. See, look, I'm totes Star Wars. Look at me go.
Star Wars. The fact that you said totes Star Wars is embarrassing. But anyway, all good. Listen, ultimately, I think all four of these things a records manager or information manager may feel at any point
absolutely
in the day.
And even then, there might be some things that you feel well controlled about, and that's absolutely sensational. Even if there's one thing that you think, I feel controlled about this, then that is absolutely fantastic. This is a marathon, not a sprint, like the 400 Star Wars movies there are.
Yeah, they're making more. All good.
So talking about, I was certainly sharing just a minute ago about my experience of being C-3PO and hitting that panic button a little bit too soon. Given my time again, and this is certainly what I advise organizations to do, is to take that breath, take that beat, and look at things from this risk and value perspective. So rather than running around crazily trying to put out every single fire everywhere, what I would much prefer to do now, and what I certainly try and work with organizations to do, is to start by looking at my information. What is it that I've got? And then mapping that into a risk and value framework, so that way I can spend more of my time and be more effective in my outcomes by spending that time managing my information that is high value, high risk, that has long-term storage, things like that, and maybe not worry as much. That's not to say ignore, but maybe not worry as much about the lower level, lower risk, short-term storage, that 20% of stuff. What I found that I was doing though, was that I was spending 80% of my time trying to manage the low value stuff, when actually I really should have been spending more of my time managing that high risk, high value stuff. But if you don't have a framework in place to be able to do that, it's so easy to launch straight into that panic kind of place. A risk value framework gives you the information that you need to be able to make good decisions along the way. So for example, let's go back to talking about with IT and making those negotiations. You can make a whole bunch of negotiations on the low value, low risk information. Maybe you're not going to negotiate so much when it comes to the management of our high value, high risk information. But having that down, having that documented, gives you something to fall back on to be able to make those good decisions first. Finally, what we want to be able to do in this space as well, and this is where we're talking about putting those guardrails around how we do things, because it's not a case of we just want to let everybody loose in 365, although that might be where some of us have ended up. Yeah. Definitely. But we want to give users the illusion of freedom. And I say this all the time, and I'm so sorry that you always have to hear about my children. I'm not sorry at all, they're hilarious, but that's a whole other story. But it's like when I take my children to a park, or a playground, I'm much happier taking them to a playground that I know is controlled, because they have a sense of freedom. They can run around wherever they want in that playground because there are guardrails, because there are barriers. I feel a whole lot more confident. They feel a whole lot more confident. They feel like they can go and play wherever it is they want to within the boundaries that have been set. M365 is no different to that. I mean, many of us would describe end users as quite childish, I think. But M365 isn't any different. It still needs guardrails. We can't just say, hey, let it loose, go and do whatever it is that you want to, because that's where we end up in that chaos state.
I was about to say you can, but
that's a surefire recipe for chaos, for sure. So what we want to do in 365 is have some of those guardrails, but our users still think that they're working in a way that really makes sense for them, but actually they're working how we need them to. Now, that might be things like having provisioning processes for new workspaces like Teams or SharePoint site collections or libraries or things like that. It might be things like having naming conventions. Policies, absolutely. Yep. Recertification processes that happen just automatically, to ensure that the right people have access to the information over a period of time. Yeah. All of that stuff can be quite seamless and hidden to the end users. They're just working in this lovely new environment, but we're putting those guardrails around that.
All right, so we've taken everyone obviously through the process. Now you need to build your own lightsaber. So what are you going to utilize to help you migrate, manage, and protect your content in M365? So we have a couple of resources that we've created that are available to you guys. They're all available here. They're all QR codes, so you can scan away if you want to. Or I think the deck will be available for people as well afterwards.
AIIM will share the deck out when this, and you'll be able to access them there. And I believe that we're going to even put some links in the chat as well for you to be able to grab those if you need to. There's 3 things here. An ebook that actually came from AIIM. It's really, really good. Got some really, really valuable statistics and information in there. And I was very honored to have written one of the chapters in that book about how to meet users where they live, and aligning your information management program to how a user wants to work. If you are interested more in that M365, how does it stack up against what I might need from a records and information management program? There's a checklist there in the middle. And also there's an ebook as well, which goes through what does an information manager need to consider when we're migrating information to 365,
governing
when
that
we're
information. Yeah.
governing those workspaces, but also managing the content in there. So 3 really good things definitely to have a look at.
Awesome. So now, question time. Are there any questions, Kevin, that have come through?
All right, very good. That is Alyssa Blackburn and Bruce Behrens from AvePoint. Let's take this advantage of the time that we have left with Alyssa and Bruce to ask some questions about our experts today. What are your questions about records management in Microsoft 365? What are your successes? What are your barriers? Let's explore them while we have a moment with Bruce and Alyssa. Now, Bruce and Alyssa, I know we have some questions already that have come in. We have one here from Corey, and Corey asks, do you feel to get the best conversation with IT that you need to know and understand the M365 ecosystem? How much do records information management managers need to know about the environment?
Yeah, Corey, great question. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that one. My advice is hard yes. If this is the environment that you're working in, it's absolutely critical that you understand how that works. And you can have a more informed conversation with IT when you understand how that's structured. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go and become an M365 Jedi yourself. I'm much more interested in people becoming information management Jedis. But understanding the environment that you're working in is critical to success. So for a start, Microsoft have got some absolutely sensational online courses that you can do. There's a number of training providers as well, some of whom actually specifically target records and information managers and 365. So they're designed for people like us to go through that. So there's lots and lots of articles, there's lots and lots of webinars. AIIM's got some great resources, don't want to forget to call that out as well. Absolutely some good stuff there, but no, totally agree that it's critical to understand the environment that you're working in, to not only make good decisions about it, but to have those really valuable conversations for sure.
I'll also add, based on our communication thing, sometimes talking to your IT department and getting them to explain how things work to you can actually help you build that relationship with them as well.
Very true, yeah.
So getting, like, you know, it's a double-ended sword here. You can teach them about records management, they can teach you about M365 and help to, because M365 being such a user-centric platform can be configured in many different ways. So it'll look a lot differently and work a lot differently depending on how it's been put together. So they can help you with that.
All right. Well, we do have questions coming in from our group today. Thank you so much for your participation. Keep them coming. Ed Sturgeon asks, any advice in implementing information governance when M365 was deployed without any?
Yes, I do actually. I would certainly recommend going and having a look at that ebook we shared, because there's more information than that. But the most important thing that I want you to know here is it's never too late, especially because, and I said this before, information management's a journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it doesn't need to be solved on day one. So this is another really important tip, and this is a great question. Thank you so much for asking this. But this is about picking what's really important to you and implementing that first, and then going across over a period of time. And when I talked about this and my own failings previously about sort of trying to, run around and put everything out all at once, was because I didn't have that good plan. What's the most important thing that I need to implement? And I would, just as one example, I would say, visibility is your first thing. Get visibility over where your content is. Maybe get it tagged, maybe get it classified, things like that. Can I assign retention rules or lifecycle rules to that later on? Yeah, absolutely you can, because you're probably not going to dispose of anything in the next 2 weeks or the next month or the next year, or even, for some organizations, potentially 5 years. Yeah. So you have some time. Figure out what your most important things are and start with that, but it's never too late to start. And I think that's the most important thing.
Doesn't matter how bad the chaos is now, you can always bring it back under control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great question. Thanks for that one.
Ashley asks, is there a specific module in M365 that allows you to manage records, or is this more dispersed across the various modules? And she also was asking, or he, I should not assume, Ashley's also asking, can you apply the retention schedule across the board?
Yeah, so Microsoft absolutely out of the box do have records management features, and look, they've been really investing heavily in that over a period of time, and that's been really fantastic to see Microsoft taking that seriously. So that you find that now Microsoft made some announcements about this, and just Googling this is you're going to find it. But if you Google Microsoft Purview, Purview, you'll find a lot more information about some of their records management capabilities. It does require your IT area to give you access to that though. And of course you have to be licensed for it. So that's just some things that you want to take into consideration there. But out of the box, yeah, absolutely. Microsoft most definitely have some capabilities there, and really important to understand what those capabilities are. You also want to consider what your requirements are and whether or not the out-of-the-box capabilities are going to be suitable for you. And that checklist that we shared as one of those resources is a great starting point for you to kind of just have some thinking topics for what's going to be relevant. Can you apply it across the board within the M365 ecosystem? Yes. How you're going to do that, there's a number of different options, there. Those resources there will be a good next step to have a look at for sure.
Steve Young asks, Microsoft 365 has records management and info governance tools that vary based on licenses, and the various licenses we're familiar with. What are the built-in tools that are absolutely necessary to set the foundation?
If we're talking about, I think I've answered that a little bit in the previous question, I guess, in terms of the built-in tools. If you're looking, I guess, to extend past that, then I would say that you're looking at information governance tools that may be an add-on that will help extend your 365 investment. So look, obviously, I'm not going into a sales plug here, but AvePoint has tools that can assist with that. But what, again, I want to reinforce, go back and consider what is necessary for you, what you need, and then start to look at what is it that I can get out of the box and what do I maybe need to extend from there.
Courtney Cooper mentions that we should pay close attention to licensing when analyzing the capabilities, and that not everything's always available. So before we run out of time, and I do want to say that if you have any more questions today for our guests, Bruce and Alyssa, please get them in now. We're running short of time, but Alyssa, perhaps we could put a bow on this. What's the most important component that we should be considering when setting up our program?
Okay, what's the one thing, if I can't do anything else, and I can only do one thing to become a records management or information management Jedi in 365, build a lightsaber, very true. No, the one thing that I want to be able to do is think about how 365 is structured and how it's traditionally called an information architecture, what that information architecture looks like, because that's where your users work. And I mentioned this when I spoke at AIIM last week, but we always must be focusing on making things better for our users. And if we're not focused on making things better for our users, then we're not going to get the outcomes that we need to. So what we really need to focus on is how our users are structuring, how they're working with information, and then aligning everything there. So if you can't do anything else, start with your information architecture, make that really flexible, make it user appropriate, and then align that to your records management program rather than making everything align, starting with your records management program and making everything align to that.
I think it's important to also point out that you want to ensure that your information architecture is future-proof. So you're not
Absolutely.
planning for today, you're planning for 2 years, 3 years time.
That's exactly right. So
how you want it.
flexibility is key on
very
that,
key
for
there.
sure.
And also usability, you know, how records and information managers may want to configure an information architecture may be very different to how users actually want to use it. So
Yeah,
it's about using those negotiation skills and
exactly.
understanding exactly how you can make those things fit together.
For sure.
Well, Alyssa and Bruce, it's been great speaking with you today. We're almost out of time. I do want to turn it back over to Nina here in a minute, but before we go, one last question. Can you give us a quick example of one use case or one organization or one example of where we have seen success using this approach? What did they do? What were the results, and how can we do it too?
Yeah, we've got a couple of case studies on the AvePoint website. It's definitely worth having a look at. One's actually a video case study as well. So if you don't want to read, you can just go and watch the video. But all of them have the same message, and this makes me really happy, definitely, and that is aligning our information management program to the way the organization works, not the other way around. So successful organizations don't lead with records management, they align records management to the organization's outcomes. So definitely jump onto our website, have a look at some of those case studies, and then mainly in the government sector, but there are some private sector ones there as well in the records and information management space. Definitely worth checking out and getting a better understanding of exactly what they've done.
Yeah.
All right, that is Alyssa Blackburn, Director of Information Management at AvePoint, and Bruce Behrens, Senior Solutions Engineer and Product Strategist at AvePoint. You can find them and find out more at avepoint.com. Alyssa and Bruce, thank you so much. At this point, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Nina. Now, Nina,
thank you, and may the 4th be with you all.
Very good. All right, Nina, tell us a little bit more now. I know you just got back from the AIIM conference, but we have some new news, and that is that the AIIM 2022 Industry Watch Report was just released. Tell us a little bit more.
Absolutely. So I'm excited to read this new Industry Watch report that AIIM has just come out with and is now available for free download. This report combines independent research, data trends, and actionable takeaways. Visit aim.org/2022-research to download it today, or you can look to the chat box for a link that will take you straight to the download. As we bring this webinar to a close, a last-minute reminder is we've recorded this webinar so you can catch anything you want to hear again in the recap email that will be sent within 24 hours. A link to the resources for this webinar will be put in the chat as well. You can find a copy of this presentation as well as additional resources through the resource link. Don't forget our feedback survey and let us know how we did. Now, before we close out, I'd like to ask Bruce and Alyssa if they have any last minute closing arguments. Not closing arguments, closing comments.
Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, you don't want us to launch into an argument, that's for sure. I'll only finish by saying, because I have to get the last word on everything, and that is information management is so important. Take that R2D2 beep, think about what it is that you're doing, and just slowly work through. It's not a race. Work through what you need to do, and good luck.
And what about you, Kevin? Do you have any closing remarks on today's webinar?
Well, it's been a great webinar today. Listen, we all know this, how we manage our information has a great deal to do with how well we manage our organizations. And Microsoft 365 is basically a ubiquitous platform that has a lot of challenges in terms of the volume and the variety of information that we must manage, but a lot of great functionality and opportunity that is built into it. There are third-party applications that can be plugged into it, and a vast array of experts in the environment like Alyssa and Bruce today. So how you manage your information has a direct correlation on how well our organizations perform. And so this has been a great webinar today, again, covering the ground that needs to be discussed in the real world. So thank you, Bruce and Alyssa, for being with us today.
A pleasure.
Absolutely. A big thank you again to our underwriter, AvePoint. Without support from our solution providers, we wouldn't be able to bring you free educational programs like our webinar. Thank you everyone for joining today. This is Nina from AIIM saying, see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.